you broached this topic on the air today on our show, talking about the volatility, fragility, durability, all these functions, and how you shouldn't necessarily be looking to have the best, highest ceiling team, but you need to have that 70th percentile, 75th percentile team you want to know they'll get you into the tournament, get you into the playoffs. Expound on that if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm committed to this philosophy, but I'm just floating it out there as a possibility. When you draft a baseball team, especially like the NFFC, where it's like an overall contest, you need to have a great team, a team that can be the absolute best team out of 500 people, certainly the best team out of 12 people. You got to take first place. Yeah, you get some money for second or third, but I mean, you really want first place. It's a big difference, and you want to win the league. Okay, but a football league is decided by the playoffs, and the playoffs are largely random. Or at least it's like getting in a bunch of all-ins where you're never going to be better than like a 60-40 favorite probably. So the key is just to get there. And obviously getting a bye, if it's a 16 playoff, getting a bye is big because you get rid of that 50-50 standoff that for the first round. So that does matter. But you could still win from the 6th seed or whatever. So really the goal is to get a team that's 75th percentile. You need to get a top third or even 60. If you're in a 12-team league that only 4 teams make the playoffs, there's no bye. Really you just have to get in the top third, 66. You need to be a 66th percentile team. And if you're in a team that has 6 teams that make the playoffs out of 12, then you just need to be in the top 50%, although, again, the buys do matter in that case. So, there's the axiom that I think is true. You really don't want to lose your league early in the draft. You'd be great if you win it. You get LaDainian Tomlinson to score 30 touchdowns, but that's the exception. Now, that's not the rule. You just want to get a solid double-digit touchdown running back receiver with 1,200 yards. You want to get a QB if you get one that gets 35 touchdowns and 4,500 yards and some rushing yards to boot or touchdowns. And that's fine for 3 rounds. You ratchet it down a little for each successive round of what you expect. And then you hope to hit on a couple sleepers in rounds 4 through 10. And that's how you get in the playoffs, right? So is there a case to be made that early on you want to go super safe? Now, who are the super safest players on the board? Well, they're Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. Those are the safest players on the board. Ray Rice is safe for a running back. He's not as safe with those quarterbacks. Receivers, none of them are that safe. Calvin Johnson's pretty safe for production. He has been nicked up in the past. But, are we going to start, is it better, even though the team with the 2 running backs, the team that goes running back, receiver, running back, got more upside and is much more likely to be the 1 seed than the team that takes Aaron Rodgers, say, 7th overall? Is the team that takes Rodgers 7th overall just more likely to make the playoffs, when 6 out of 12 teams make it or when 4 out of 12 teams make it?
That's a great question, and I think it, bears, some research. The problem is you got to set a control. You got to set like a standard type of league and figure out what your parameters are first, and then you figure out. Then it's hard to retrofit this too because every year is different. 2 years ago we had that huge bifurcation between the elite quarterbacks and the next level. Last year was a lot more muddled, and so, for instance, last year you probably didn't benefit as much from that, but 2 years ago you probably did. So I guess the whole thing is you don't want to overconclude, and that's one of the things that we talked about today in the show when we had Jonathan Bales on the show is football research is almost inherently flawed because of the sample size issues. There's only 16 trials a year. You can go micro play by play, but even then, I'm not sure if that's really going to work out so well for you in terms of trying to figure out these macro draft strategies.
Well, there's a couple problems. You hit on one of them on the show today. You said, well, by the time a guy has 5 years in the league to get the proper sample, he's now a different player. Now he's a 28-year-old running back, not a 23-year-old running back, and he's not the same guy, so now it's too late once he gets a significant sample. I think we had Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders on, and I think it was him that he made the argument, I believe it was him, that when a quarterback throws 600 passes, that's like 600 at-bats. So that it is a full sample for those guys. The other problem, though, even with that, is that their conditions around them are so different, right? We know in baseball it's the same guy. He may get better or worse. He may be healthy or hurt at different times. But for the most part, the variable is exactly the same. He's some guy, assuming he's on the same team or in a comparable park, it's the same guy facing a whole bunch of different pitchers. And over time, we can kind of figure out who that guy is. But the quarterback, his offensive lineman get hurt, his top receiver gets hurt, his top receiver gets healthy, his running back starts doing well, his defense plays better, his defense plays worse. So, he's 3rd and 5, he's got a lot of 3rd and 10s, and, he's in hitters counts, he's in pitchers counts. I mean, basically, the quarterback, not just is he getting older, is he changing as a player, but his whole team is changing so much. then it's very hard to map sort of constant conditions for these guys over more than a very short sample.
Oh, absolutely right. And of the big four sports, baseball is unique that it lends itself to this statistical analysis better because it's an individual confrontation every single time. Whereas in football, it's completely, one play can be blown up by an offensive lineman not doing his job. It's very much opponent dependent. I think it's a lot more. There's a lot more dependent skills, like you said, and I even like basketball. Who's on the court with you at the same time. Hockey, it's totally that way. If you get to play on Crosby's line, all of a sudden you're 20 goals better than you would have been otherwise. You hit the lottery. So, and that's an extreme example, but it holds. I mean, I think that's one of the factors we always are dealing with when we're trying to do any sort of statistical analysis with football.
Yeah. So that said, so it's difficult. But I do think that in terms of fantasy and where guys got drafted and what production they had by position, that is trackable, right? I mean,
yeah,
we're not
yeah, of course.
Players. So his study said in 2011 it was anomalous. Quarterbacks were, they were like running backs. They were way better at the top than they were in the middle and lower. And some of them weren't even drafted at the top. Cam Newton and Matt Stafford were drafted late, but the top 5 performers were way better than, say, the 12th performer. But in 2010, 2009, and 2012, the curve was much different. It was that quarterbacks, as you went through the top 12, just kind of declined linearly. It was just this like very, diagonal line that as you, went down the list of what they were ranked, they got a little bit less production. In 2011, it was like boom, it was a huge drop. So, so that turned out to be the anomaly, at least of the last 4 years. So we can say pretty safely that running backs drop off more quickly as the draft goes on than quarterbacks do. But, again, quarterbacks are safer, especially the elite ones. They're more reliable year to year. The same guys, Breeze, Rodgers, Brady, Newton for his first 2 years. Matt Ryan's been in the same 6-7 range or wherever he's been the last couple of years. These guys are consistent in where they rank at the end of the year, so they're much safer and much less injury-prone now that they've changed the rules where you can't even breathe on the quarterback. So, again, if we're only looking for top half or top third of our league to get into the playoffs, should we just say, you know what, I know quarterbacks don't give you the best bang for the buck in terms of overall expected return, but because of their safety and reliability and lack of volatility, and because I don't need to win the league, I just need to do okay, I'd rather pay in my first 2 rounds for a guaranteed commodity and then gamble later, even if the overall expected return is worse.
Yeah, the only problem with that is the number of starting spots that we have. I mean, it goes completely counterintuitive to our normal weight on the quarterback draft strategy, especially if you have more than 2 running backs and 2 receivers out there. At some point, you got to fill the volatile positions. So why not fill them with the best, most reliable players? I think that's the counter argument.
But no, that's all true, and that means, that is how you get the most total expected points for your year. But what I'm saying is, risk and reward are inseparable, right? So like your reward is bigger for doing that, but you're also taking on riskier top commodities. So it's kind of like saying, well, let's say, it's kind of like in baseball, right? A stars and scrubs strategy probably has more upside than a spread the wealth strategy, spread the risk strategy, because if your scrubs hit and you already have stars, you're going to have a team full of all stars. Whereas in the spread the risk thing, you're just looking for production everywhere, right? So
yeah, but here's where I'm getting at, though,
more
too.
Upside, correct?
What's the difference in volatility between the number 1 quarterback and the number 10 quarterback? I mean, that's the real question, right? Well, I mean, how much more volatile is the number 10 or 11 quarterback versus the number 3 running back? How much volatility? What's the volatility difference there? Because if it's not that volatile to get the number 10 quarterback, you don't need to kind of go and reach out for the safety there. That's my point.
Well, but here's the thing. So I think it isn't that much more volatile. I think the number 10 guy is probably an Eli Manning or let's say Tony Romo.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking of.
It's probably a pretty safe bet to get 28 to 30 touchdowns, maybe a couple more, and 4,000 plus yards. Okay, but that's you're giving up a lot of production versus Rodgers, who's going to rush for 2 or 3 or 4 touchdowns, 250, 300 yards, throw for 40 touchdowns, and 4,500 yards, or Breeze. So you're giving up a lot of production at your most reliable space. Now you get a reliable 7th round pick out of Romo, but don't you want not just reliability of mediocrity, but reliability of excellence with your 1st round pick?
Yeah, I see that, but I think the conceit is though that okay, well whatever I'm giving up at a more volatile position, that I'll be able to make it up later in the draft.
You won't. You won't, and I'm conceding that you won't. I'm conceding that if you and I are betting on who's got a better chance to get the most points in the league, I would bet on the team that waited on quarterback to get the most points in the league. But I'm saying, is it possible that if you and I were to bet on who's going to make the playoffs, that it might be better to take the quarterback first, just to make the playoffs, not to get the most points in the league?
Again, the more starting spots you have, though, and if you only one of them is a quarterback, the less likely I think that's to be true.
Okay, well, let's go standard, because obviously if you had 8 receivers and 5 running backs and 1 quarterback, you couldn't even, no matter what the argument is, you couldn't take a quarterback. Let's go
standard. 1-2-2, no flex.
What's that?
If you go 1-2-2 and a flex,
receivers and a non-QB flex. Yes, six what I call 6 non-QB, non-tight end guys. Okay, 6 running back receiver types. Although the flex could be a tight end, but who cares? Standard league, as we normally play it these days, which has changed since the early days. So there's a 6-to-1 ratio against the quarterback of guys you got to fill.
Right, there is, and I think and even then though you're competing for, it's still 16% of your roster. I need 16, 15%, 12%, whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, how much benefit are you getting out of that extra stability? The more I think about it, the more I'm leaning against this being true.
Well, here's my example. Okay, so let's say I take Rodgers with the 7th overall pick, and you take, C.J. Spiller. Okay, and if Spiller does what he's supposed to do, and let's say there's like a 65% chance he does somewhat of what he's supposed to do, and a 35% chance he's a bust either through losing carries at the goal line or getting hurt. Okay. And let's say Rodgers has like an 80% chance of what he's going to do, or 85. I don't know what the real numbers are, but I'm making these up. Let's just say that were the case. Then the thing is, like, as long as Rodgers stays healthy for the whole season, and I'm in that 80-85% range, that's just a huge chip on my team. But if Spiller doesn't get into that 65% range where he's even remotely worth that pick, you're in big trouble to make the playoffs. You just lost your first pick. Right? Now, you're going to get more value late because you're going to have Romo as your QB in round 7. I'm going to have Andre Brown as my running back, my second running back, say, because, that's the way we went. But there's still some chance Brown does well. And, Romo is very reliable to do pretty well. So it's kind of like net, I'd rather have your team, again, to have the most points in the league. But in terms of just, like, not losing my first-round pick and screwing up my entire draft, maybe I'm in better shape.